Namaste and welcome. You're listening to our UPSC News Analysis for the 12th of May, 2025. In this deep dive, we're aiming to break down the day's key current affairs. We'll explain the basic concepts relevant for aspirants and really highlight those mains relevant issues, and importantly, all with an Indian perspective. Today, we've got quite a range, from border issues to, well, public health and policy debates.
Indeed. It's a dynamic mix today. Lots of crucial developments for understanding India, both internally and, how we engage externally. Shall we start with the situation along the Laos Sea?
Yes, let's do that. The news about the renewed ceasefire understanding between India and Pakistan. It comes after, 4 days of intense firing, acknowledged yesterday, May 11th.
That's right. And this is against the backdrop of the 2003 ceasefire agreement. The Laos Sea, of course, being that de facto military boundary in J&K.
And these agreements, they usually go through the DGMOs, right? The Director Generals of Military Operations.
Exactly. That's the established channel. The DGMO level talks are, crucial for de-escalation and maintaining that line of communication.
Okay. And India's DGMO Lieutenant General Rajiv Ghai, he made a statement about Operation Sindoor.
Yes, he did, reporting the elimination of around 35 to 40 Pakistani military personnel.
But also, tragically, confirming the loss of 5 Indian soldiers in that operation.
And Operation Sindoor, as we understand it, was linked to the earlier Pahalgam attack in April, the one with the civilian casualties.
That's the context, yes. 26 civilian casualties in that attack. So Operation Sindoor was framed as a response. It really shows the tightrope walk, doesn't it? Responding firmly, but trying to keep the peace.
Absolutely. And this underlying trust deficit, it's persistent, fueled by cross-border issues and differing views on security, makes any ceasefire inherently fragile.
Which brings us to the reports of continued violations, even after this renewed understanding. Tangdar in Kupwara, for example.
Precisely. It really makes you question the sustainability of this agreement. The 2003 agreement, stemming from the Vajpayee-Musharraf talks, aimed for some calm. Using the DGMO channel again shows a return to that mechanism, but these violations, they highlight the deep-rooted problems.
Definitely. And you have to see this in the context of recent history, too. The 2016 surgical strikes, Balakot in 2019, the Article 370 revocation.
All of which have significantly shaped the current dynamics. They create this cycle of action and reaction. Understanding that history is key for UPSC aspirants analyzing the present.
So let's connect this directly to the mains exam. What are the critical issues and challenges here?
Okay, well, first, the repeated ceasefire violations, despite agreements that points directly to the lack of trust.
Right.
Second, the continued existence of terror infrastructure across the border, a major obstacle.
The human cost?
Absolutely critical. The impact on civilians near the Laos Sea, displacement, trauma, loss of livelihoods, that's a huge dimension.
And the broader societal and political impacts.
Socially, you see fear, displacement becoming almost routine for border residents. Politically, it sparks debates, demands for accountability, and concerns about international mediation, which touches on sovereignty.
And ethically, it's such a difficult balance.
Right. Extremely difficult. Balancing the need for peace with the imperative to retaliate against aggression. Plus, the governance challenge of rehabilitation for civilians and security forces alike.
So looking forward, what's the path? What's the way ahead?
It has to be multi-pronged. First, strengthen communication DGMO level, maybe back channels too, to avoid miscalculation.
Okay.
Second, invest heavily in civilian safety infrastructure, bunkers, better evacuation plans. That's crucial.
Makes sense.
Diplomatically, India needs to keep emphasizing bilateral resolution, pushback against any third-party ideas, and long-term rehabilitation plans are non-negotiable.
And technology.
Yes, leverage tech. Better surveillance, drones, maybe AI-driven analysis for border monitoring, deterrence through technology.
Got it. And just quickly for prelims Operation Sindoor, remember that connection to the Pahalgam attack. DGMO is LT General Rajiv Ghai, ceasefire year 2003, and key violation spot Tangdar in Kupwara.
Okay, shall we shift focus? Down south of Kerala, there's a significant legal development.
Right. The Kerala government challenging the WAC Amendment Act 2023 in the Supreme Court, announced yesterday.
Yes. To understand this, we need the basics. A waqf is property dedicated for religious or charitable purposes under Islamic law. Waqf boards administer these.
Governed by the WAF Act of 1995.
Correct. And the 2023 amendment has faced criticism, mainly around centralization fears and potential impact on state autonomy.
And Kerala's specific arguments are?
They're arguing it's unconstitutional, a threat to federalism, and violates the rights of religious communities to manage their affairs. They plan to implead in an existing case challenging the act.
Now, the government's role in WAC management isn't entirely new, is it?
No, not at all. You have the Central WAC Council, state WAC boards, all under the Ministry of Minority Affairs. Constitutionally, Article 26 is key freedom to manage religious affairs.
But there's also Article 254.
Yes, which says if there's a conflict between central and state law on a concurrent list subject, and WAF is on the concurrent list, 7th schedule of the central law usually prevails unless the state law got presidential assent.
And there have been issues historically. Mismanagement, encroachment.
Definitely. Committees like the Sachar Committee at JPC, they've pointed out issues and suggested reforms in the past.
So, drilling down for Maine's relevance again, what are the core issues this challenge brings up?
Well, it's a classic federalism debate, centralization versus state autonomy. Then there's the religious autonomy angle, perceived intrusion. And the fact that it's on the concurrent list inherently creates potential for legal ambiguity and conflict.
And the societal and political ripples.
It could become communally sensitive, sparking debates around identity, and it definitely affects center-state relations, especially with opposition-ruled states.
Ethically, what's the tightrope walk here?
Balancing state autonomy with national integrity, maybe ensuring uniform standards, also ensuring transparent WAC management without political meddling. That's a key governance concern.
What's the likely path forward now?
The Supreme Court's role will be crucial for judicial clarity on the center's powers here. Ideally, any reform should be consultative, involving stakeholders.
Right.
Strengthening existing WAC boards, maybe through capacity building and tech like digital mapping, might be more effective than just centralizing. And boosting state-level accountability.
Okay. And for prelims notes, WAC Act 1995, amended 2023 by Ministry of Minority Affairs, Article 26 for religious freedom, concurrent list. And Kerala's move is impleading in the SSC.
Now, let's turn to a public health concern, unfortunately recurring in Kerala.
Yes, the confirmation of a new Nipah virus case. A woman in Kozhikode reportedly critical.
Yes, Nipah or Nivi. It's zoonotic, primarily from fruit bats. But human-to-human transmission is also possible, as is transmission via contaminated food like palm sap.
The symptoms are quite severe: fever, headache, respiratory issues.
That's potentially fatal encephalitis. The mortality rate is worryingly high, 40 to 75%. Kerala has seen outbreaks before 2018, 2019, 2023.
What's the immediate response this time?
Prompt action. Contact tracing is underway. 112 contacts identified so far. Health workers, relatives. Containment protocols are active. Isolation, public awareness campaigns.
And looking back at past outbreaks, what's the usual government response?
Kerala has established protocols. Isolation wards, movement restrictions sometimes, rapid response teams. The center, via ICMR, usually steps in with support, expert teams.
Didn't they even procure monoclonal antibodies once?
Yes, from Australia for emergency use in a past outbreak. Legally, the Epidemic Diseases Act 1897 and the Disaster Management Act 2005 provide the framework. Plus, the IDSP and the One Health framework are key.
One Health recognizing the link between human, animal, and environmental health.
Exactly. And factors in Kerala like population density, proximity to natural habitats might play a role in these recurring outbreaks.
So for Maine's, what are the big challenges with Nipah?
Lack of a specific treatment is number one. Limited infrastructure in some rural areas for diagnosis and critical care.
Yeah.
The high fatality rate itself, the risk to healthcare workers,
Yeah.
and potential stigma hindering efforts.
And the broader impacts.
Well, public health scares disrupt everything: economy, schools, hospitals. It really highlights the need for strong pandemic preparedness. And the ethical dilemma of quarantine versus individual liberty always comes up.
Is there an environmental angle, too?
Definitely. Deforestation can push bats closer to human areas, increasing the risk of these spillover events.
So the way forward, what needs focus?
Strengthening the One Health approach is vital. Better cross-sector collaboration. Expanding virology surveillance for early detection, continuous public awareness on hygiene, food safety.
International cooperation.
Yes, with WHO, countries like Bangladesh, Malaysia who've dealt with Nipah, and crucially, ongoing investment in healthcare infrastructure, isolation facilities, trained staff.
Okay. Prelims facts. Fruit bats are the reservoir. First Indian outbreak, Siliguri 2001. Fatality rate 40-75%. Acts involved: Epidemic Diseases Act, Disaster Management Act, and the One Health approach.
All right, let's shift to the southern coast now. Kanyakumari, there are protests by fisherfolk.
Yes, starting yesterday, May 11th. They're protesting offshore hydrocarbon surveys near Waj Bank.
Okay, let's break that down. Hydrocarbon exploration means searching for oil and gas, often using seismic surveys, which involve sound waves, and then drilling.
And Waj Bank.
It's known to be ecologically very rich, a biodiversity hotspot, and crucially important for fisheries in that region. So the fishing communities there are very vulnerable to disruptions.
So their protest is against the union government's approval for these surveys.
Exactly. They're warning about potential damage to fish populations, biodiversity from the seismic activity, and potential drilling. It's gaining political traction, too, with opposition parties voicing support.
What government policies regulate this kind of activity?
There's the Hydrocarbon Exploration and Licensing Policy, HELP, and the Open Acreage Licensing Policy, OALP, aiming for energy security.
But there's environmental oversight, too.
Supposedly, environmental impact assessments, EIAs, under the Environment Protection Act's 1986 are required. And Coastal Regulation Zone, CRZ, rules aim to protect marine ecosystems and coastal livelihoods, plus the broader Blue Economy framework for sustainable ocean use.
For Maines, this looks like a classic conflict.
Absolutely. Livelihood versus development. A major challenge often cited is the weakness of EIAs, lack of proper local consultation often leads to these protests.
And the specific risks. Marine biodiversity from the sound waves.
Yes, impacting fish breeding, navigation, and the feeling of social exclusion among fisherfolk that decisions are made without their input.
What are the potential economic and environmental impacts?
Locally, impact on fishing income, maybe tourism, food security.
Yeah.
Nationally, linked to energy independence goals. Environmentally, risks of oil spills, habitat destruction, climate impact from fossil fuels.
So what's a constructive way forward here?
More inclusive decision-making is key. Genuine consultation with local communities before approvals, strengthening the EIA process, making it truly participatory.
Maybe designating sensitive areas like Wadge Bank as off-limits?
That's an option, ecologically sensitive zoning. Also, exploring alternative livelihood support for affected communities. And longer term, the push towards renewables reduces pressure on these sensitive areas.
Okay, prelims points. Wadge Bank biodiversity hotspot. HELP and OALP hydrocarbon policies. Environment Protection Act, CRZ rules governing laws. Conflict. Fisherfolk versus Ministry Petroleum and Natural Gas.
Next, a very unfortunate incident highlighting human-wildlife conflict.
Yes. Tragic news from Ranthambore Tiger Reserve. A forest ranger killed by a tiger during routine patrol yesterday, May 11th.
Human-wildlife conflict, or HWC, is a serious issue where habitats overlap. Ranthambore is a vital tiger habitat, and forest rangers, they're really on the front lines of conservation, doing crucial but risky work.
What are the details emerging about this incident?
It happened deep inside the reserve. Immediately raises concerns about safety equipment for rangers, emergency response effectiveness in remote areas, and the general trend of rising encounters. It's led to tributes, of course, but also strong calls for better safety measures.
What government frameworks exist for tiger conservation and staff safety?
Project Tiger, since 1973, is the main initiative. The National Tiger Conservation Authority, NTCA, under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972, oversees reserves and sets guidelines, including for ranger training.
And eco-sensitive zones.
Yes, ESEs around protected areas aim to minimize conflict by regulating activities. For staff welfare, there are provisions for risk allowances, insurance, training via the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, WCCB, and increasing use of smart surveillance tech.
Thinking about Maines, what core issues does this tragedy highlight?
It starkly points to potential gaps in safety gear, despite guidelines. The policy implementation gap. Habitat shrinkage is a huge factor, pushing tigers and humans closer.
And the impact on the staff themselves?
Mental health challenges, job insecurity. They work in tough conditions. It's a major concern.
How does an incident like this affect conservation more broadly?
It can lower morale among staff, obviously. Sometimes it fuels negative public perception towards wildlife protection. And it brings up difficult legal and ethical questions about managing conflict relocation, even culling in extreme cases.
And the governance and ethical angle?
State accountability for ranger safety is a big one. And the ethical tightrope, balancing animal rights and conservation goals with protecting human life and ensuring occupational safety.
So concrete steps forward. What needs to happen?
Mandatory safety protocols, rigorously enforced. Better gear. Patrols always in pairs, minimum. Technology integration, thermal imaging, GPS alerts, better tracking.
Insurance and compensation.
Needs to be adequate and swift for families. Comprehensive training on wildlife behavior, conflict mitigation, emergency response is vital. And better coexistence planning, habitat corridors, community buffer zone management.
Okay, prelims facts. Location Ranthambore, Project Tiger launched 1973. NTCA is the statutory authority. Legal backing, Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Recent concern, ranger safety.
All right, let's shift to the political sphere. Demand from the Indian National Congress.
Yes, they called yesterday for a special session of Parliament, specifically about alleged foreign mediation Donald Trump's claims regarding the recent India-Pakistan ceasefire.
Okay, context here is important. India's consistent stance on Kashmir. It's an integral part. Issues with Pakistan are bilateral, no third-party role.
And the 1994 parliamentary resolution.
Crucial. It unanimously declared the entire J&K, including Pokhara, as integral to India. The special parliament session itself is a mechanism for urgent national matters, requires cabinet recommendation, president's approval.
So what's Congress questioning specifically?
They're concerned about the center's perceived silence on Trump's claim. They want a clear reaffirmation of the no foreign intervention policy in the 1994 resolution.
And India's traditional policy on this is?
Absolutely firm.
Yeah.
No third-party mediation. Bilateral talks are the only way, as per the Symbol Agreement, 1972, and Lahore Declaration, 1999. Parliament has mechanisms like resolutions, debates. The MEA consistently reiterates this position.
For Maines, what issues does this political demand raise?
Potential lack of transparency in foreign diplomacy can fuel domestic politics. International claims, even unsubstantiated ones, can touch upon sovereignty concerns, and it highlights the executive-legislature dynamic in foreign policy.
How does this impact polity and governance?
It underscores the need for parliamentary scrutiny in foreign policy, Parliament's role in reaffirming national consensus. But there's also the risk of politicizing sensitive security matters.
And the ethical or diplomatic considerations.
It's a balancing act, firmly denying claims diplomatically without escalating tensions, reaffirming sovereignty without disrupting key relationships.
So the way forward, how should this be handled?
A clear official clarification rejecting mediation is needed. Reaffirming the parliamentary consensus, maybe through a formal statement or briefing, the MEA could brief opposition leaders to ensure a united front.
And externally?
Continue educating the global audience on India's position, and strengthen bilateral channels with Pakistan, always within that bilateral framework.
Prelims points. 1994 resolution, entire J&K integral. Simla Agreement, 1972. Lahore Declaration, 1999. Special Session Procedure. India's Kashmir policy. No third party.
Next up, a potentially significant development regarding the Indus Waters Treaty.
Yes. Reports yesterday, May 11th, suggest senior Indian officials are talking about potentially putting the IWT in abeyance amidst current tensions.
The Indus Waters Treaty, 1960, mediated by the World Bank, is fundamental. It allocates the western rivers Indus, Jhelum, Chenab, largely to Pakistan, and the eastern rivers Ravi, Beas, Sutlej to India.
But India has some rights on the western rivers.
Yes, limited rights for things like hydropower, agriculture, non-consumptive uses, but under strict rules laid out in the treaty. It's actually been quite resilient despite conflicts.
So why the talk of putting it in abeyance now?
Seems linked to the current tensions. India is reportedly planning to speed up dam and hydro projects on the western rivers while claiming to stay within treaty limits. No official withdrawal announced, but it signals a strategic shift.
Has India taken steps related to the IWT before in response to tensions?
Yes. After Uri, 2016, and Pulwama, 2019, there were reviews, talk of faster project approvals. Projects like Pakal-Dul, Radal, Kiru on the Chenab are often mentioned.
And the institutional mechanisms.
The Indus commissioners from both sides meet regularly, as per the treaty. The Central Water Commission monitors things. Ministry of Jal Shakti handles IWT, coordinating with MEA.
If India were to seriously pursue reviewing or suspending the IWT, what are the main relevant challenges?
Huge geopolitical implications. International scrutiny, World Bank involvement is likely. Climate change impacts on river flows add complexity. Ecological impacts of big dams.
Legal constraints?
It's a binding treaty. Unilateral action could be seen as breaching international law. Plus, the China factor, Pakistan might lean more towards China for water talks if India seems aggressive.
What about strategic and domestic impacts?
Strategically, it could be a non-military pressure point on Pakistan. Domestically, it could boost India's hydropower goals, water rights usage, especially in J&K, Himachal. It signals a shift towards treaty maximization.
And the ethical and environmental dimensions.
Balancing national interests with downstream riparian rights, Pakistan's, ecological impacts downstream, displacement concerns from dam projects, needs careful handling.
So a pragmatic way forward.
Focus on fully utilizing entitlements within the treaty first, maintain diplomatic communication, transparency on hydrological data, build domestic consensus on project sustainability, and maybe push for regional water cooperation in the long run, considering climate change.
Okay, prelims. IWT signed 1960, Eastern Rivers, India, Ravi, Bees, Sutlej, Western Rivers, Pakistan, Indus, Helum, Chenab, recent projects, Pakal, Dul, Radal, Kiru, administered by Ministry of Jal Shakti, Indus Water Commissioners.
And finally, let's catch up on the human side of the border situation again, the return of displaced civilians.
Yes, positive news there. Villagers in J&K and Punjab returning home as of yesterday, following de-escalation in the ceasefire talks.
This follows displacement caused by ceasefire violations along the low sea and the international border, IB. A major hazard during return is unexploded ordnance UXO.
So, authorities are issuing warnings.
Yes, safety advisories about UXOs. The return is cautious, conditional on continued peace, and thorough sanitization of areas by security forces.
What kind of government support exists for these communities?
Immediate relief via district administrations, NDRF shelters, aid, security forces, Army, BSF handle UXO clearance. Long-term, the Border Area Development Program, BADP, funds infrastructure, including bunkers.
And technology like smart fencing.
Yes, the CIBMS project aims to improve border security. Plus, existing schemes like PM Faisal Bima for crop loss, PM Mbewas Yojana Grameen for housing help.
For Maines, the recurring challenges for these communities are
Recurring displacement, obviously, safety hazards from UXOs, underdevelopment due to insecurity, and the significant mental health impact.
What about broader impacts on society, governance, economy?
Loss of livelihoods, especially agriculture. Strain on local governance during crises. Disruption of essential services, schools, rations, even voting.
Key ethical and governance issues.
Ensuring fair and timely compensation and rehabilitation. And the constant balancing act. National security versus the human dignity and stability of border populations.
What steps could improve things long-term?
More permanent safe shelters, bunkers in all border villages, better equipped UXO clearance units, maybe mobile governance units for delivering services during displacement. Crucially, psychosocial support.
And involving locals.
Yes, participatory planning for infrastructure and safety measures, making solutions more effective and locally relevant.
Prelims check. Agencies. NDRF, BSF, Army, local admin. Scheme, BADP, Hazard, UXO states. J&K, Punjab, Border Tech, CIBMS.
That seems to cover the key developments from yesterday's news cycle.
Absolutely. We've gone through the India-Pakistan ceasefire dynamics, Operation Sindoor, the Walk Act challenge in Kerala, the Nipah virus resurgence, fisherfolk protests in Kanyakumari, the tragic incident in Ranthambore, the call for a special parliament session, the potential IWT review, and the return of displaced civilians. We really hope this detailed breakdown gives you, our UPSC aspirants, a solid understanding of these current affairs and, importantly, their relevance for the mains exam.
Yes, these issues connect deeply to national security, governance, society, and international relations. Understanding the nuances is vital for your preparation.
Do subscribe for our daily updates, and please share your thoughts in the comments. We value your input. You can also download the audio or transcript for revision. Jai Hind.